The autumn wind hit the Montana Valley like a wounded creature, crying through the cottonwoods and rattling the dry grass around the Thornfield ranch. Abigail Thornfield stood on her porch, staring at the empty land that stretched toward the jagged mountains. The sky looked like old metal, gray and heavy, holding the bite of winter inside it. 6 months had passed since her husband, Samuel, died. 6 long, aching months of waking before dawn, wrestling stubborn cattle, fixing fences by lantern light, and lying awake alone while wolves howled in the dark. The other ranchers helped in the beginning, but those visits faded. Everyone knew a widow alone on a ranch was like a candle in a windstorm. The flame never lasted long. Abigail's shawl tugged in the cold wind as she wrapped it tighter around herself. At just 32, she felt older than her years. Her hands were rough from ranch work. Her honey-colored hair stayed tied in a tight bun now. The green eyes that once sparkled beside Samuel now carried quiet storms. She turned to go inside when she froze. 2 riders were coming down the trail, dark shapes against the sinking sun. Her hand moved to the Winchester by the door. No one came this far after dark, and those who did rarely brought good news. The riders slowed as they reached the gate. One was a tall man in a worn duster. Behind him, holding to his waist, was a small child. The man stepped down carefully. He lifted his hat in a polite gesture. "Ma'am," he called through the wind. "Sorry to trouble you this late. Name's Nathaniel Blackwood. I was told in town you might be needing a ranch hand." Abigail kept her rifle close but didn't raise it. "Who told you that?" "Fella at the general store," he answered. "Said the widow Thornfield was trying to run her place alone. Said you were too proud to ask for help, but might not turn it away if it knocked on your door." That sounded exactly like old Henry at the store. "And you just happened to be looking for work?" she asked. Nathaniel removed his hat fully now. His dark hair was wind-tossed, his face roughened by sun and hardship. "Truth is, ma'am, my daughter and I have been riding for near 3 weeks. We need a place to winter. I know cattle, I fix fences, I don't drink, and I don't cause trouble. You'd get honest work for fair wages." The child slid off the horse then. Abigail saw her clearly in the fading light, a thin little girl, maybe 7 or 8, dusty dress, tangled dark hair, eyes wide and tired. She held a cloth doll to her chest like it was the only thing she owned. "Papa," the girl whispered, "I'm cold." Something inside Abigail cracked at that small voice. "What's your daughter's name?" she asked gently. "Evangeline," Nathaniel said, "but she answers to Evie." Abigail studied them harder now. The man's boots were worn down. His coat had been patched many times. The child's dress had clearly been let out to fit her growing body. They were travelers carrying loss with them. The same kind she carried. "Put your horses in the barn," she finally said. "There's fresh hay in the loft. When you're done, come inside. I've got stew on the stove. Too much for one person anyway." Quote. Nathaniel nodded with a relief he tried and failed to hide. "We're obliged, ma'am." "Truly." Abigail watched them walk toward the barn, father and daughter hand in hand. The cold wind picked up, tossing dried leaves across the yard like little bones. Winter was coming fast, but for the first time since Samuel died, she didn't feel completely alone. Inside, she added more wood to the fire and set out 3 bowls instead of 1. Her hands trembled at the unfamiliar act. She hadn't cooked for anyone else in months. Through the window, she saw the glow of a lantern in the barn. Nathaniel worked with steady movements, careful and respectful. The kind of man who knew first impressions mattered, especially when a child depended on him. A knock sounded sooner than she expected. When she opened the door, Nathaniel and Evangeline stood there freshly washed. The girl's hair was braided. Her tiny dress was cleaner now. She held her doll in one hand and looked at Abigail with shy hope. "Come in," Abigail said, stepping aside. "Warm yourselves." The cabin felt alive again when they entered. Evangeline whispered, "It's pretty," and Abigail's heart twisted. She had forgotten what a child's voice sounded like in her home. "Would you like to help me set the table?" she asked. Evangeline nodded quickly, placing her doll carefully on a chair before carrying the bowls with both hands like they were precious. At supper, there was something in the room Abigail hadn't felt in months. Conversation, warmth, life. Nathaniel ate gratefully but politely. Evangeline fought to keep her eyes open between bites. "How long since her mother?" Abigail asked softly. 4 months, Nathaniel said, his voice dropping. Fever took her. Abigail looked at the child again with new understanding. "I've got a small room off the kitchen," she said. "Used to be storage, but it's warm and has space for 2 bedrolls, if you're staying." Nathaniel's eyes lifted sharply. "You're offering us the job?" "I'm offering you a 2-week trial. Winter's close, and I need someone who works hard and smart." "You'll get both," he promised. Their hands met across the table. Rough, calloused, honest. A frontier contract sealed in a single shake. When Abigail carried the sleeping girl to the spare room, Evangeline wrapped small arms around her neck without waking. That simple trust shattered something frozen in Abigail's chest. Tonight, the cabin didn't echo with emptiness. Tonight, she wasn't alone. And for the first time in months, Abigail Thornfield let herself hope that maybe, just maybe, help knocking at her door wasn't the beginning of trouble, but the beginning of something else entirely. Morning came early on the Thornfield ranch, carrying the smell of frost and the soft gold of first light. Nathaniel woke before dawn, blinking at the unfamiliar ceiling and the quiet breathing of his daughter beside him. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he remembered the warm supper, the safe room, and the kindness of the widow who had welcomed 2 strangers into her home. He rose carefully so he wouldn't wake Evangeline, pulled on his boots, and stepped into the main room. Abigail was already at the stove, her hair pinned neatly, her movements calm and practiced. A pot of coffee steamed beside her. "Morning," she said without turning. "Breakfast will be ready soon." Nathaniel poured a cup and took a slow sip. It had been months since he'd tasted real coffee, hot, strong, and made in a home instead of over a campfire. "I can start chores while you finish," he offered. "Eat first," Abigail said. "You'll need strength for the day, and your daughter is still sleeping like a stone." As if on cue, a small voice murmured from the hallway. "Papa?" Evangeline appeared in the doorway clutching her doll, her hair messy from sleep. She looked fragile in the morning light, like a little wildflower trying to grow after a storm. "I'm right here, sunshine," Nathaniel said, kneeling down and opening his arms. She ran to him, and he picked her up easily. Abigail's tone gentled. "Good morning, Evangeline. Would you like some milk with your breakfast?" The girl's eyes widened. "Real milk?" "Fresh from the cow this morning." Evangeline looked up at her father for permission, and when he nodded, she whispered, "Yes, please, ma'am." Quote, "They ate bacon, eggs, and biscuits in quiet peace. Evangeline ate slowly, tucking half her biscuit into her pocket like she expected she might need it later. "There's plenty more," Abigail said gently. "No need to save any." Evangeline flushed and nodded, embarrassed. Inside, Abigail's heart twisted again. After breakfast, Nathaniel prepared to head outside, but Evangeline held his hand tightly. "Where are you going, Papa?" "To help Mrs. Thornfield with the ranch. You'll be able to see me from the window." "Can I come?" He hesitated, but Abigail stepped in. "The hens likely left some eggs this morning. Would you help me gather them?" Quote, Evangeline looked torn, but curiosity won. "I can help, if you want me to." "I'd like that," Abigail said warmly. Outside, the crisp air filled their lungs as they walked toward the fields. The land stretched in gold and brown waves, quiet and waiting. Nathaniel paused halfway to the barn, taking in the ranch in full daylight for the first time. The place was strong, but tired. Fences leaned. The chicken coop door hung crooked. Some boards on the barn roof sagged dangerously. A ranch this size needed 2, maybe 3 hands. Not one widow alone. "I'll start with the corral fence," he said. "That corner won't last another storm." "The tools are in the barn," Abigail replied. She studied him for a moment. "You know your work." He nodded. "I've done enough repairs to last me a lifetime." Abigail led Evangeline to the hen house, and Nathaniel heard the child gasp loudly when she found her first warm egg hiding beneath a hen. The simple sound made Nathaniel smile. The day passed in steady, honest work. The sun climbed. The fence took shape. And every now and then he looked toward the house, catching glimpses of Evangeline following Abigail like a small shadow. Around noon, they met at the pump for water. Evangeline's hair was dusty, but her eyes shone bright. "Papa, I got 12 whole eggs," she announced. "And Mrs. Abigail showed me the barn kittens, and I fed the chickens." And Nathaniel laughed softly. "You've been busy." Quote, after a lunch of cold beef and bread, Abigail spread a map on the table, pointing out water sources and winter pastures. Her voice was steady, but Nathaniel saw the worry behind it. Feed was low. Winter was coming. The ranch was hanging on by sheer will. Later that afternoon, while Nathaniel repaired tools in the barn, he heard laughter, real, full laughter, from the house. He froze, listening. It had been so long since he'd heard his daughter laugh like that. Inside, he found Abigail and Evangeline covered in flour, kneading dough with messy hands. "We're making bread," Evangeline announced proudly. "Real bread." Nathaniel took in the scene. The warmth, the laughter, the soft joy, and something in his chest eased for the first time in months. That evening, they ate warm bread with butter and honey. Evangeline declared it the best thing she had ever tasted. After she fell asleep by the fire, Nathaniel and Abigail sat together at the table. She mended Evangeline's dress while he polished a harness. "She's growing," Abigail murmured. "Faster than she thinks." Quote, "She always did," Nathaniel said softly. He watched Abigail's sure fingers, the light catching her hair, the calm strength she carried everywhere she went. Without asking, she had stepped into places of his daughter's life that had been empty since her mother died, and somehow it felt natural, comfortable. "You've been kind to her," he said quietly. Abigail looked up. "She's easy to love." Nathaniel swallowed hard. His voice came rougher than he expected. "So are you." The room went still. Abigail set down the fabric slowly. Her green eyes held his in quiet understanding. "We're both still healing," she said gently, "but something is growing here." He nodded. "It is." They didn't move closer. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. The fire crackled softly as two lonely souls sat together, realizing that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone anymore. But danger was already riding toward them. They just didn't know it yet. The next week passed in a steady rhythm of ranch work, warm meals, and the slow, careful stitching together of 3 lives that had once been torn apart. Nathaniel fixed fences and repaired tools. Abigail tended the ledger and cooked meals that filled the house with comforting smells. Evangeline followed them both, learning, laughing, and healing. But trouble found them faster than peace could settle. It began on a cold morning when Abigail stepped outside with her coffee and saw 3 riders approaching from the north. Their pace was slow and deliberate, the kind of ride meant to be seen. "Nathaniel," she called, her voice tight. Nathaniel came from the barn immediately, pitchfork in hand. He followed her gaze and his jaw tensed. "Evie," he said quietly, "go inside, now." One look at his face, and the child obeyed without a single question. The riders pulled up at the fence. The man in front was big, with pale eyes and a scar pulling at the corner of his mouth. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Thornfield," he drawled. "Pike Morrison. I work for Cyrus Hartwell." Quote, "I know who you are," Abigail replied. "State your business." Morrison tipped his hat in a fake polite gesture. "Mr. Hartwell says some of your cattle were found grazing on his land. He don't take kindly to theft." "That's a lie," Nathaniel said calmly. "We moved the herd last week." Morrison's smile widened. "You callin' me a liar?" "I'm calling you mistaken," Nathaniel replied. "Easy enough to fix. We'll check the fences today." Morrison's eyes slid over Nathaniel, sharp and calculating. "And you are the hired hand?" "That's right." Something in Morrison shifted. He recognized a man who'd seen trouble before, someone not easily scared. "Well," Morrison said, turning his horse slightly, "Mr. Hartwell don't want bad blood. But he don't want stubborn neighbors either. Winter's coming. Accidents happen. Fires happen." His pale eyes drifted to the house window, where Evangeline peeked for only a second. "Especially dangerous for little ones." Nathaniel's entire body went still, quiet, controlled. deadly. "You've made your point," he said softly. "Now leave." Quote. Morrison smirked. "Be seen, you." The riders left in a cloud of dust. Abigail's hands shook when the door closed behind Evangeline. "He threatened my home. He threatened my child." "Our child," Nathaniel corrected gently. "And yes, he did." Determination hardened in his eyes. "We prepare." They spent the day checking the fences, finding tracks where cattle had been driven deliberately across boundaries to frame Abigail. That night, Nathaniel moved his bedroll to the main room, his rifle within reach. He kept watch until dawn. 3 nights later, trouble returned. Nathaniel woke to the smell of smoke. "Abigail!" he shouted. "The barn!" They ran outside to flames roaring against the black sky. Heat blasted their faces as the barn's west wall burned like dry paper. "The horses!" Abigail cried. Nathaniel charged into the burning building. Smoke swallowed him instantly, but he pushed forward, freeing each horse in turn. The last one, a young mare, was frozen in fear. He covered her head with a blanket and led her out, coughing, stumbling. Outside, cattle panicked, crashing against the corral fence. Together, Abigail and Nathaniel drove them away from the fire, dodging hooves and falling embers. Evangeline sobbed in the yard, clutching her doll. "The kittens were inside," she cried. "Papa, the kittens!" Abigail pulled her close, holding her as the barn collapsed into a pile of burning beams. By morning, the barn was gone, their winter feed burned. Tools destroyed. Several cattle lost. It was a deliberate blow, Hartwell's warning. But the valley had noticed. By afternoon, neighbors rode in. Patterson, the Harrisons, the McKays, families who'd known Samuel and respected Abigail. They looked at the ruins, then at each other. "Burning out a widow," Tom Patterson said. "No more." They worked together for 3 days, raising a new barn stronger than the last. Women brought food. Children gathered nails. Men hammered until their hands bled. Abigail had never cried in front of them before, but this time she did. "Thank you," she whispered. "All of you." "You're one of us," Patterson said. "We stand together." Quote. But the peace didn't last long. Late one night, Nathaniel heard horses again, many of them. He looked out the window just as 8 riders surrounded the house. Pike Morrison called out, "Blackwood, come on out. Hartwell wants a word." Nathaniel stood still. "They want me, not you. Get Evangeline to the cellar." But Abigail shook her head fiercely. "We stand together." Before either could move, more riders approached fast from the east. Nathaniel recognized them. Patterson, the neighbors, and in front of them, Marshal Brennan. "Evening, Pike," the marshal said. "Funny you serving a warrant. I don't recall signing one." Morrison stiffened. "You're making a mistake, Marshal." "No," Brennan said. "You are. Drop your guns." For a long moment the world held its breath. Then Morrison snarled, reaching for his weapon. Nathaniel moved, fast, precise, protecting everything he loved. The gunshot echoed across the yard. Morrison fell. His men surrendered quickly after, and one of them, shaking, desperate, began to talk. He confessed everything: the fires, the threats, Martinez's death, Hartwell's orders. Within weeks, federal marshals arrested Cyrus Hartwell. His empire collapsed under witness testimony and stolen land records. The Thornfield ranch was safe, and Nathaniel, Abigail, and Evangeline, standing on the porch as the sun rose, finally breathed freely. "What happens now?" Abigail asked softly. Nathaniel slipped his arm around her. "Now we live. Together." Evangeline hugged them both, smiling through remaining tears. "We're a family now, right?" Nathaniel kissed the top of her head. "We've been one for a while." Abigail's eyes shone. "Let's go home." And they did, into a future built not from fear, but from hope, love, and the fierce promise that they would never again face the world alone.